Are you buffering? First of all, what does buffering even mean? Buffering is anything that keeps us from doing what we really need to do to reach our goals. For example, we may buffer by online shopping rather than completing a dreaded task, or we may scroll social media rather than having a difficult conversation, or we may research for hours on end to put off making a decision. Our brain likes to keep us comfortable and safe. It looks for ways to buffer to keep us from processing emotions, for example, especially negative emotions that we want to avoid. We often use buffers to avoid pain or temporarily sweep something under the rug to deal with later. It often comes out as overeating, overspending, overworking, etc. It's usually a false pleasure that causes us to avoid the true pleasure of walking in unconditional love, forgiveness, and those good emotions we want, which is the more healthy and constant stream of wellness and pleasure we get to enjoy in life. A false pleasure gives us a super shot of dopamine, but it doesn't last like true pleasure. And it only numbs us from a negative emotion temporarily because we haven't dealt with it, so it's still there for later. They aren't part of the solution, and they may even make the original problem we were trying to avoid seem worse by the time we get around to it. While some buffering is subtle, other buffering is more obvious, can even be destructive, such as drinking too much alcohol. I love sharing fun facts with y'all, especially from literature and history, but today the nerd in me just wants to define a simple word for you. So here goes. Buffer as a noun is something that shields, cushions, protects, or comes between. Something that reduces shock or protects someone against difficulties. It can be a chemical solution that resists changes in pH when acid or alkali is added. As a verb, buffer means to protect from impact. Even good things can be used as a buffer when they distract us from what we need to do or prevent us from becoming all we are designed to be. Have you ever had a project you were avoiding and you found yourself doing a million other things instead? Like cleaning the baseboards instead of completing necessary paperwork. We often become expert deep cleaners when it's time to do another task that we don't want to do, like pack for a trip, or even normal things like food, drink, work, shopping, exercise, reading can be buffers if we're using them to escape our reality. Buffers can be almost anything. It's really more about what we do with them and how we use them and what we are avoiding when we use them. Our brain is seeking that dopamine, and it does like to settle for the oversized serving that comes from a false means rather than from the healthier dose. Our body is designed, for example, to love good food, an apple, fruit, all the different things that God has given us, right? But often what happens is we like to taste the extra sweet, chocolatey goodness that comes from an overindulgent snack. And then what happens is our body gets used to this size serving, becomes accustomed to that false shot of dopamine, the oversized shot, and then the cycle repeats. So we start reaching for the dopamine of the higher shot, the more sugar, etc., versus that one that's going to serve us longer, better. Do you occasionally feel numb? Do you ever feel like you're just sleepwalking through life? I have had clients tell me this, and I remember a time I felt that way myself. Like going through the emotions, but not really living. Are we living our smallest version of ourselves because we don't want to feel our emotions? I have a whole episode on feeling and processing emotions. If you've never heard it, you can go back and find it. It's a great one to encourage you to go ahead and process those unprocessed emotions. Because what are we really trying to avoid? And are we avoiding it? What is stopping us from living into all that God has truly designed us to be? Because these buffers, they do not propel us forward into His purpose for us. Quite the opposite. Buffers keep us stuck, like being stuck in a spiral, or maybe even in that infamous rat wheel that just keeps on spinning. They keep us from processing necessary emotions so we can move forward. They keep us from developing the emotional resilience that we need to fulfill our purpose. They keep us from showing up how we really want to show up in our relationships, in our jobs, in our homes. People-pleasing is another mode of buffering because it often leads to hiding our true thoughts and emotions. When we people-please, we may say or do what pleases someone else because we know that's what they want to hear, or we know they might commend us for it, but it prevents us from speaking or doing what we really need to. And it often disguises our true feelings, which may cause us to show up in a false way that we don't mean to show up in. It may even postpone a situation at hand, kind of keep it under that rug a bit longer. So if you're feeling these ways, numb, sleepwalking, just going through motions, wondering what you're trying to avoid, I just want to encourage you to take a look at your life and ask, am I buffering? If so, what would be left if I stopped buffering? And I'll tell you what's left is our actual, real, beautiful life. The ups and the downs, life is 50-50. It's good and bad. It's all the extremes, right? And everything in between. And it's all the beautiful things that God has for us. And we don't want to miss any of those things. We don't want to miss any of what He has for us and His plan and His design. Sometimes He has amazing lessons that He wants to teach us, but we aren't ready to learn because we're avoiding by buffering. And those lessons might be necessary for the growth that we need for our future. So again, what's stopping us from living into all God designed us to be? Imagine all the good that can come if we stop buffering and we become fully awake to all He has for us. It's a great, big, beautiful life, and we don't want to sleep through it. Until next time, this is my hope for you. You can find me at stephaniejohns.com or on the gram at The Hope Coach. You can also use the links below to join my email list or the forum for one-on-one coaching.